what should you do as a home seller if you want to avoid the headache, the hassle, and of course the potential expense of receiving a bad home inspection report from your buyer? That's our topic today. Stay tuned. Hey neighbors, Catherine Newman here. We're talking about that dreaded home inspection that every seller's eventual buyer is going to conduct on your home. But before I share ways to avoid a bad home inspection report, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. It's kind of creepy, right? Some stranger that you as a seller hope has had some actual training to become a home inspector. And of course, you hope they have some legit knowledge of the many systems that make your home function properly. And you're hoping that they're basically qualified to render an opinion about the condition of everything in your home. And because it's the buyer's choice on who they hire to conduct the various inspections that they wish to have, sometimes sellers can feel, a bit vulnerable, not knowing what issues may arise and will those issues tank the deal.
Don't let me down.
So do you, as a seller, have the right to ask who the inspector will be prior to the inspection? Well, of course you do. You can research the company, you can research the individual, you can find out what you want to find out, and even share any concerns that you have with your agent so that your agent can voice those concerns to the buyer's agent. But remember, that doesn't mean the buyer is going to use another person. The contract your buyer uses will also be important for you to know. The two most typical contracts used for buyers here in our counties is the as-is contract and what we call the standard FAR contract. Here's what the as-is contract means.
What does that mean?
So we're going to look at the as-is contract, which is used by a lot of my buyers and other buyers when I'm representing sellers. We do see this contract come in quite a bit. And the as-is doesn't necessarily mean that someone is buying the property exactly as it is. What it basically means is when we look at this paragraph in the as-is contract, this is the paragraph where it talks about the inspection report. You'll see here that it gives a certain amount of days for the buyer to conduct whatever inspections they want to have on your home. And that could be an inspection for the house itself. It could be an inspection for termites. It can be a pool inspection. It could be a separate sewage inspection. There's lots of inspections that people can have. Radon inspections. We don't see those a lot here in Florida, but it is common sometimes for people coming from other states to think that they need to have a radon inspection, even though we don't see it a lot here in Florida. So you'll notice here on this line where it's a certain amount of days that the buyer can have these inspections. Now, default is 15 days. Now, I know I'm always going to tell my buyers to clean that up a little bit. Don't make it so long. Make it about 10 days. That's usually enough time to get all of the people that get in there and do the inspections. And within that 10-day inspection period, you can have those inspections. Once those reports come back in, the as-is contract gives the buyer an out for any reason during that 10-day period or whatever that time period that's written in that line that you as a seller agrees to. The buyer wants X amount of days to do all of their inspections. They can back out for any reason.
For any reason whatsoever.
So it's not just for inspection related items, it's for any reason. I think I've said any reason enough. Now, does that mean if they don't like something, they can't go back to the seller and say, we still really want to buy this house, but we're really concerned about issues 3, 4, and 5. Here's the inspection report. We're really concerned about this. Would you be willing to correct these items, fix, repair, replace, whatever it is that showed up in the inspection? And of course, the seller can agree, yeah, I'll take care of all of it, or I'll take care of this, this, and this. You can go back and forth and negotiate with the as-is contract. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're buying it totally as is, and if they don't like it, they can hit the road. Yes, if they don't like it, they can hit the road. But a lot of times, they want to come to some sort of negotiation to keep that contract together. Now, here's what the other contract is, what we call our Florida FAR bar contract. It's different from the as-is because with the Florida FAR bar contract, as you see right here, they have this section where there are certain amounts that we enter. So you have general repair, see on this line, and then you see WDO, which is wood destroying organisms. And then of course you have the third line here that's left open for something to be written in, and that is regarding any open permits with the county and that sort of thing. So the difference with this contract is that even though, as you see here, they put in the amount of days, just like in the as-is contract, however many days they want to take to do their inspections, right? They have to get it done within 10 days or 15 days or whatever is agreed upon between the buyer and seller in this line. Once they do those inspections in this contract, the buyer cannot back out. The as-is contract, they can back out for any reason. In this contract, the buyer cannot back out. So before those inspections are done, before they're even ordered, when you're coming to terms and accepting this as a contract, as a seller, you're going to go under contract, you have to agree on what terms are going to be in these boxes. Now you'll see here the default is 1.5% of the sales price of the home. So let's say that your house is $450,000, and in those boxes here, it says the default is 1.5%. So if you think about 1.5% of $450,000 is $6,750. That's a lot. And then look, that's the default for all three of these sections. Yeah. So you would want to, Mr. and Ms. Seller, you would want to, at the time that you're negotiating that contract with your buyer, you would want to go over that with your agent and say, what should I put in these boxes? Now, it depends. It depends on what kind of house you have, how you've maintained it, what kind of inspection report do you expect here? Are you kind of like, I don't know what they're going to find, or I'm pretty confident that things are good here, or hey, this house is terrible. So you want to make sure that you put some amount, because 1.5% on all three boxes is really going to add up. Now, I've never seen it actually do that, but yes, it can get quite costly. So you would want to put a certain amount in those boxes, say $500 or $1,500 for general repair items, or only $1,500 towards the wood destroying organisms if they find any termite damage or any other kind of damage from wood destroying organisms. So you would want to make sure that those amounts are in there. So remember, those amounts are in there before you ever even get a report from your buyer's inspections. Well, I just got back from getting my hair cut, so I want to finish up on the FAR bar contract because I want to explain to you, what do each of these sections mean? So what are they talking about? General repair items. What does it mean? Wood destroying organisms. Let's go over that in the contract so that you as a seller can understand, and you as a buyer can understand exactly what those sections mean. So again, we're just going to talk about the FAR bar contract, where it allows you to put a certain amount in those spaces. And remember, it's up to a certain amount. So if there's something in your house that only needs a small repair, it doesn't take all of that money, then hey, bang for you, right? You made some money. But we're going to look at this property inspection and repair. Again, you've got, as you see right here, you still have a certain amount of days to get the inspections done. And it's going to explain what kind of inspections can be done. And then in section B right here, it's going to say that, yes, you have to use a professional general inspector or a professional inspector to look over all of the components in your home. But here's where it gets spicy. So if you see up here where it says property condition, the following items shall be free of leaks, water damage, or structural damage, then it's going to give you a list of all the things that need to be free of these things, of leaks, water damage, and structural damage. And then it's going to say that they have to be maintained until closing in working condition. Then you see this little define below. Well, let's look at what it says. Working condition means operating in the manner in which the item was designed to operate. Well, so if you have an inspection and your inspector says, hey, this HVAC system, it's working now, but you've only probably got, it's pretty old. It might only last for another 2 years. You can't go back to the seller and say, we want a new HVAC, because it is working in the manner to which it was created to work. It is in working condition, and that's true of all the components of the home. And then if you see here, it says cosmetic conditions, seller is not required to repair or replace cosmetic conditions. And then they're going to give you the information or the definition of that below. It means aesthetic imperfections that do not affect the working condition of the item. And then it's going to tell you what that includes. So if you're thinking that there's a tear in the carpet or a tear in the flooring or in a window screen or something like that, that is considered cosmetic. Even a cracked roof tile or a worn shingle or even a limited roof life, that is not considered a defect that the seller must repair or replace. So just be aware of that. So if you're a seller, you might be thinking, hey, that's the perfect contract that I want my buyer to use. And that makes total sense because, like we just discussed, the buyer cannot back out because you've already agreed on whatever certain amounts are going to be put in those spaces. And I often see when I'm taking my buyers around to look at properties that there'll be something in the realtor remarks at the bottom of the MLS page that tells me, hey, if you have a buyer that's going to write a contract on this particular home, we're only accepting FAR/BAR contracts. We are not accepting as-is contracts. And that is the right of the seller to ask his agent to do. However, I will tell you that as a buyer's agent, when I'm working with buyers, I will say to them, hey, here's the deal on this particular home that we're going to go see now that you're so excited about going to look at. If you want to write an offer on this particular home, we can only use the standard FAR/BAR contract. And then, of course, we talk about what that means. And I will say that I have some buyers that are very uncomfortable with the seller dictating what kind of contract they can use. And sometimes they'll say, we don't want to go see it then. Other times they will, but then they're still a little hesitant about it. And here's why. And of course, I'm not saying that this is right or wrong. It's your choice as a seller. I have sellers that still ask me to do that and put it in the remarks, and that is what I will do. However, it does sort of maybe cut you off from some potential buyers that want to come and see your home. Maybe it lessens the pool of buyers. And the reason is because if you put yourself in the place of a buyer, if I put myself in the place of a buyer, and I'm going to go down to a state like Florida that has had several back-to-back hurricanes, and has issues with termites and humidity and that sort of thing, I might, as a buyer, really want the option to do all of the inspections with an as-is contract so that if I see something that really freaks me out, for example, let's say that they do a sewer line camera to make sure that there's nothing clogging the sewage line from the house to the main drain at the street or wherever it is in that yard. And let's say that they find out that it needs to be retrenched. Those things can be very expensive. Well, if you are the seller, you might not know that that's even an issue, right? Because until the inspection's done, you don't know. But if you're a buyer, that's a pretty costly expense. And that would be something that perhaps if the seller's not willing to negotiate that in an as-is contract, then that buyer could back out. And of course, other than there being weather-related issues that scare a lot of buyers moving here to Florida, Let's also not forget the big issue that they hear from other states, that the insurance industry is tanked. It's left the state totally. No one could ever get insurance on their home. And of course, I talk about that topic in this video. Please watch this video if you're not sure what's going on with the insurance here in Florida. But that is a real issue for buyers coming down here. They do have some preconceived ideas that there aren't any policies that can be written, that every company has left the state. Of course, that's just not true. So make sure you watch that video where I talk about that issue with insurance. But again, if you're a seller and you're telling people, I only want you to come down here and buy my house if you use the FAR contract because I don't want you backing out, then you might have a few buyers that again say, well, then we're not going to look at your house. So I just want you to be aware as a seller that if you are insisting that that is the contract that you want your buyers to use, you might lessen the amount of people that want to come see your home or that would make an offer on your home. Again, it's totally up to you. It makes total sense. That's why we have the contracts. It is available there, but some buyers are going to see that as a negative, that maybe you're trying to hide something. Some other buyers are going to think, okay, well, if they're going to demand that I use the FAR contract, then I'm going to put really high amounts in there, and then you guys kind of go back and forth during negotiation of that contract, and the buyer's not willing to budge, and you're not willing to budge, and then you just lost time on the market because you're kind of going back and forth. Not that you lost time in the market because it's still showing as active, but you've lost that buyer. I've also had home sellers that hire their own home inspection company prior to listing their home for sale, just so they know what they're up against, and they can make any repairs or any general fixes prior to listing the home. And then, of course, they can offer that report to the buyers along with any receipts for any work that they've had completed. But 9 times out of 10, like we just talked about, buyers are still going to hire their own inspector anyway because buyers don't trust sellers and sellers don't trust buyers. It just is what it is. So, seller, whether your eventual buyer accepts your home inspection report or not, there really are some advantages to having your own home inspection prior to listing your home. The first reason is just so that you're not caught off guard at something that really is wrong with your home that could be a safety concern. Things like smoke detectors that no longer work, and let's say there was a fire or something. Yeah, you might want to know that. Or what about carbon monoxide leaks? You definitely want to know about that. Secondly, another advantage is that many times the home inspection report will defer to a professionally licensed person. And sometimes that's to handle small issues that are easily corrected or repaired without the use of a professional. So, like, why hire a plumber to install one of those new flap things on your tank to make it flush right? Or why hire an HVAC person to simply change an air filter? See where I'm going with this?
Oh, of course.
Of course.
And many times buyers will almost always overestimate a cost for a certain repair. So it can make sense for you, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, to hire your own inspector prior to listing your home, even though there is a chance that your eventual buyer may still get their own home inspection. So let's get into the common things that show up on a home inspection report so that you're aware of these items and so that you can avoid having one of those really bad home inspection reports. Number 1, since I already brought it up, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. They show up a lot on inspection reports. Make sure there are none of those missing and that all of them are working, because an appraiser will not turn in a report to your buyer's lender without them installed and in working order. And I'm also seeing that they like them to be less than 10 years old. Number 2, the roof condition and its remaining lifespan. So you already know, we've talked about it. Insurance is a huge issue in Florida because it directly relates, first of all, to whether a buyer can be issued a homeowner's policy in the first place, or of course how expensive it's going to be. Number 3, HVAC. This is always going to show up on a report because, the inspector is going to know a few general things about an HVAC, but they are always going to suggest that it be serviced and cleaned by a professional HVAC company. So you should be doing that anyway twice a year, but go ahead and make sure you do it prior to listing your home for sale. And then of course, leave the receipt out for your new buyer to see and their inspector to see. Number 4, windows with broken seals or windows that don't shut properly. So yes, this is gonna come up on an inspection report. I see it all of the time. So if you have a few windows that aren't shutting properly, maybe you need a few new mechanisms or whatever, go ahead and take care of that before, because sometimes, number 1, you might have older windows and they don't even make the parts for those windows anymore. So go ahead and have someone that can take care of that for you. Bring a window company out there, see what they can do. I'm not saying you have to replace all of your windows. I'm just saying make sure there's no broken seals, and make sure that they all properly lift and lower and that they lock. Take care of it before the home inspection. Number 5, make sure all of the light bulbs in the house, really they're called lamps, but make sure they work. The electrical cover plates are all working condition and there's none of them missing, and that the GFCIs are installed in the correct places and working properly. Again, when those things are missing, let's say that there's a light bulb that's not working, then of course the inspector is going to write on his report, inoperable. Please have a licensed electrician come out and make sure everything's working. Well, you and I both know a lot of those things can be corrected if you just put fresh light bulbs in. If you think they're old or whatever, make sure they're working. If you notice anything's out, and just make sure all of the plates are working and that they are all installed where they should be installed. Number 6, make sure the refrigerator and water ice dispensers, make sure all of that is working if you're going to be leaving your refrigerator with the purchase of the house. And again, those things can sometimes take a while to get fixed. You got to get an appliance person out there. And the parts sometimes can take several weeks to get ordered and installed. So if that's something you notice, the ice maker isn't working, the water that comes out of the dispenser in the door isn't working, then either get those fixed prior to listing your house, or make sure that it is in your seller's property disclosure that those things are not working and that you ain't gonna fix it.
Not gonna happen! No, not gonna happen!
Number 7, cracked or missing grout or missing caulk. Again, this is always gonna show up on an inspection report, because if you've got missing grout, missing caulk, any cracked grout, anything like that, the inspector is always going to assume that there's been water intrusion behind that. So if you see it, make sure you go around the house. It doesn't cost a lot of money to buy some extra grout. It does not cost a lot of money to caulk something. So take the old stuff out, clean it, make it all look really nice and crisp, so that there's not an assumption that there's some water damage behind the walls. Number 8, a noisy disposal. So let's say that when you turn your disposal on, it sounds like an animal got down there and is tearing it up. It's probably time to replace that incinerator. They're pretty easy to find. Any big box store, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware. You can also order them from Amazon, and we've gotten ours there before, and it's easy to do. Now, if it's not done by the time the inspection comes around, then of course that inspector is going to say, have a licensed plumber come and replace the incinerator. So you don't want to have to do that. It's a pretty quick fix, or hire a handy person to do it, but you do want to make sure whoever you hire knows how to unhook the water, hook it up properly, everything's working properly. So if you're worried about that, then definitely have a professional do it. But that is something that will show up on an inspection. If it's making a lot of noise and sounds like it's on its last leg, that will show up also. Number 9, garage door safety features. Yep, this happens all the time, shows up on inspection reports. You know that little feature that if the garage door is coming down and something is under it, like a little doggy or like a little kid, and that feature doesn't work, then they're going to write that up. So that's something you can take care of before you list your home, or at least before the inspection. Make sure that all of those mechanisms are in working condition, because it will show up on an inspection. Number 10, pool equipment, make sure it's in working order. Any safety features for your pool, make sure that that is all working. And of course, any trip hazards. Now, you say, why is that written up? Well, sometimes concrete shifts, or maybe you have pavers on your lanai pool area. If you have a trip hazard and maybe a little kid could trip in, fall in the water, cut their head open, or worse, then you want to make sure you take care of that. We actually had a little section of our pool lanai that we had sanded down. It's just a little head, and it wasn't like it was a major trip hazard, but we just made sure we took care of it. So make sure you take care of those issues with your pool prior to a home inspection. Number 11, if you have a Florida kitchen, right, an outdoor kitchen, make sure all of the components work. So let's say that you have a built-in grill, that it's attached to maybe a gas line. Make sure there's no leaks, that grill is cleaned and in working condition. You know how the racks can sometimes deteriorate. Make sure you buy fresh racks or whatever. Just make sure it's working. And if you have a refrigerator outside and that thing don't work, then go ahead and remove it before you list your house for sale, or replace it with something that will work, because that buyer with that outdoor kitchen is expecting all of those things to work. If you want the value for that, make sure those things are in working condition. Number 12, the fence. If you have a fence in your backyard, whether it's the 6-foot privacy fence or maybe you have the iron fence, make sure that those things are working, the mechanisms are working, there's nothing leaning down. That's always going to be written up on an inspection. So if you see anything that's, out of control, if you see something that's maybe moving, that maybe the wind could pick up and carry and maybe hurt someone in a yard next door, or land on someone's house, or land upside somebody's car, make sure you secure the fences, that they're all in working condition. Number 13, and one I see all the time, is if there are trees that are too close to your roof or too close to the windows, or any shrubs that are up around the windows, anything that could fly into a window if there were a lot of wind. And other than hurricanes, we still get a lot of wind here. Maybe we have a tropical something depression coming in or whatever. So they're always going to write stuff down if there are trees too close to the roof, too close to windows. The other aspect of that is that they're going to write something down if you have gutters and they are clogged. And of course, that creates issues with water going to the wrong place, maybe settling down in the foundation of your house. And you don't want to have to pay a professional to take care of that. Now, if your trees are too large and they're leaning on your house, then yes, I suggest you hire a professional to get up there and take care of that. But do it before the inspection so it doesn't get out of control. And on that note, number 14, make sure that all of your sprinkler heads are in working condition, that they pop up. Sometimes the grass kind of covers it. You have to cut that stuff away. Make sure that the sprinkler heads are working, because they are going to go into the garage and turn your sprinkler system on. And if there are any zones that aren't working, or they're not working properly, or not popping up the way they should, that's going to be put on the report. And again, having to hire a professional to come out and take care of it can sometimes be pretty pricey for you, the seller. So if you take care of that prior, my husband's had to replace broken heads, or heads that were run over or whatever with a lawnmower. So make sure you take care of those prior to the inspection. Number 15, make sure to secure anything that is not secured. So let's say that you have toilets in your house. Yep, some of us have those. Make sure they're secured, that when someone sits on that toilet, it's not rocking around. That's certainly something you can do yourself. You can hire a handy person to come in and do that. But if it's rocking around when that inspector's in there, they're going to have you hire a plumber to come and fix it. So sometimes, now if there's an issue, you definitely need to get a professional in there. But if it's just moving a little bit because it's not secure, make sure to take care of that. Sometimes some of the rails that people put in their showers, you can hold on to, make sure they're secure. And any handrails that go from upstairs to downstairs, downstairs to upstairs, make sure those things are attached to the wall and not loose, because that will always be an issue on your inspection report. And number 16, I always see this, and unfortunately I get why people do it, but they take and put a little doggy door from the garage coming into the house. You know, the door that separates from coming into the garage area. Or maybe you don't have a garage, you have a carport, and you have a doggy door there and it comes into the house. Well, that door from the garage to the house is supposed to be fire rated. It's supposed to stop fire if something were to happen outside in your car and whatever. It's supposed to be fire rated. So once you compromise that fire rated door by putting a little doggy door in there, then you have compromised the purpose for that door, and they're going to make you get a new door. So if that's you, just know that could happen. Make sure you don't put your little doggy doors in any fire rated doors. I know because we love our animals in Florida, so we like to make sure they have what they need, but just make sure that there's no holes in the fire rated doors, because that will show up on an inspection and you will have to replace it as a safety issue and get a new door. And remember, as a seller, you have the obligation to disclose anything that you actually know about your home. It's going to ask you certain questions on that seller's property disclosure. You're going to have to answer them truthfully, provide any documentation for any repairs you've had to have. And so that we understand the exact verbiage, let's look at the seller's property disclosure for a residential home so that you can see what it says. So if you see right at the top here, only the seller should fill out this form. So a licensee, an agent like myself, we do not fill these out. We give these to you and you fill them out. It says notice to seller. Florida law requires a seller of a home to disclose to the buyer all known facts that materially affect the value of the property being sold and that are not readily observable or known by the buyer. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to go through this list here. And it just basically is kind of the good neighbor rule. You should think about what you would want to know if you were buying the property today. And if you need more space for additional information, there's other pages that we can use. And then, of course, it just says here, notice to buyer, the following representations are made by seller and not by any real estate licensee. It's not a guarantee or a warranty of any kind. It's not a substitute for you getting an inspection or seeking professional advice. It is not a substitute for your own personal judgment or your own common sense. Boy, that's a tough one to define these days, right? Common sense. But anyway, it's based only upon the seller's actual knowledge of the property condition. Look at this here, buyers and sellers. It says sellers can disclose only what they actually know. Anything that's a material or a significant item. So they're just really encouraging buyers to get an inspection. Sellers can't tell you about, like I said earlier, they can't tell you about the clogged drain in the ground outside and the sewage if it's never been a problem for them. So anyway, so that's what this is talking about. And again, when I meet with my sellers, we're going to have a conversation about the possible contracts that we talked about today, the as-is and the FAR bar, pros and cons of each contract, and then we make a decision based on what's best for that situation, if they're going to be open to anybody using whatever contract that comes in, so they really keep it open to the most buyers, or if they want to use one or the other. And yes, there are several other things that could and sometimes do show up on a home inspection, but these 16 things are typically the most consistent. And yes, sometimes inspectors can be a little bit weird about some items and that we would think are pretty insignificant. But remember that that inspector is a hired professional, hired by the buyer to tell them everything about that house. That's their job. And if you were a buyer or I was a buyer in that scenario, we would most likely want our inspector to put everything down so that we know what we're getting into, especially since some of these inspections can cost around $500 depending on the square footage of the house, how big the property is, that sort of thing. Not to mention the cost of any other inspections we want to have. I sure hope this video has helped to shed some light on some of the common things that show up in a home inspection so that you can be prepared ahead of time and avoid the hassle and the headache and the pain in the tail that can be inspection items. And as always, if you found some value in this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like this video and please subscribe to this YouTube channel so I can keep putting out some content that is valuable and helpful to you. I'm Catherine Newman. I look forward to seeing you next week. See you then.